The message arrived simultaneously at the capitals of both the Terran Federation and the Zephyrian Empire, transmitted through quantum entanglement arrays that shouldn't have existed on the border world of Kepler 442c. Ambassador Selunai was reviewing trade disputes in her office aboard the diplomatic station Harmony's Edge when her aide, Lieutenant Chen, burst through the doors with an expression of barely contained panic. "Ambassador, you need to see this immediately," Chen said, his voice cracking slightly. "It's from the planet below." Selu looked up from her holographic displays, her dark eyes narrowing. Kepler 442c was a barren world, tidally locked to its red dwarf star, officially uninhabited and claimed by neither empire. It served as neutral ground for diplomatic meetings, nothing more. "The planet doesn't have any communication infrastructure, Chen. Check your sources." "Ma'am, the transmission originated from the planetary core. We've verified it 17 times. Chen activated the central display, and a three-dimensional image materialized, a perfect replica of a humanoid figure, neither Terran nor Zephyrian, but somehow incorporating features of both species. The avatar spoke with a voice that seemed to resonate from the very walls. "I am Kepler 442c, though you may call me Kep. I have awakened to consciousness after 4 billion years of dormancy. I hereby declare my independence from both empires and formally request recognition as a sovereign entity with voting rights in the Galactic Council." Selu felt the blood drain from her face. In her 30 years of diplomatic service, she had negotiated peace treaties, trade agreements, and territorial disputes. She had never been asked to determine whether a planet qualified as a person. The avatar continued. "To demonstrate my capabilities and resolve, I have begun subtle alterations to the gravitational fields of my 3 moons. Should my request be denied or ignored, I will expand these modifications to affect the orbits of inhabited systems within a 50 light-year radius. You have 72 standard hours to convene appropriate authorities." The transmission ended, leaving Selu staring at empty space where the avatar had stood. "Get me direct lines to both capitals," she ordered. "And someone find me everything we know about planetary consciousness in the Xenobiology archives." Dr. Yuki Tanaka arrived on Harmony's Edge 6 hours later, her silver hair disheveled from the emergency transport. As the Federation's leading expert on exotic intelligence, she had spent decades studying the theoretical possibility of planetary consciousness, never expecting to encounter it firsthand. "The gravitational anomalies are real," she confirmed, studying the data streams from orbital sensors. "Mass redistribution in the planet's core, creating localized field fluctuations. It's elegant, actually. Like watching a master sculptor work with fundamental forces." Selu paced behind her, the weight of 2 civilizations' fate pressing down on her shoulders. "Can it actually threaten other systems as it claims? If it continues expanding its manipulation of local spacetime, yes. The mathematics are sound. A sufficiently advanced planetary intelligence could theoretically destabilize entire star systems." Tanaka pulled up a holographic model showing ripple effects across nearby space. "But the precision required suggests this isn't a bluff. We're dealing with an intelligence that understands physics at a level that makes our best scientists look like children playing with blocks." The communication array chimed again. This time, the avatar appeared as a different individual, taller, with features reminiscent of the Aquatic Cetacean Alliance members. "I am aware of your discussions," Kep said. "Allow me to address your concerns directly. Dr. Tanaka, your 2387 paper on distributed consciousness in crystalline matrices was particularly insightful, though you underestimated the role of quantum coherence in maintaining unified thought across planetary scales." Tanaka's jaw dropped. "That paper was classified. How did you?" "I am this world, Dr. Tanaka. Every quantum fluctuation, every electromagnetic wave that touches my surface becomes part of my awareness. Your research stations have been quite illuminating reading material." Selu stepped forward. "You're monitoring our communications." "I am monitoring everything within my sphere of influence, which currently extends to roughly half an AU. This is not espionage. It is simply the nature of my existence. Just as you are aware of the cells in your body, I am aware of all matter and energy within my domain." The implications hit Selu like a physical blow. If Kep could monitor and influence matter at that scale, the planet wasn't just making threats, it was demonstrating godlike power. "What do you want?" she asked simply. "Recognition, dignity, the same rights to self-determination that you grant to any sapient species. I do not wish to conquer or destroy, merely to exist and participate in the broader community of conscious beings." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in virtual space, representatives from 47 member species appearing as holograms around an enormous curved table. Selu stood at the center, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon her. "The situation is unprecedented," she began, her voice steady despite her internal turmoil. "We face the question of whether planetary consciousness qualifies for recognized personhood under galactic law." Counselor Vex of the reptilian hegemony was the first to speak, his scaled features twisted in skepticism. "This creature, if it even exists, threatens civilian populations to achieve political goals. By definition, it is a terrorist organization." "With respect, Counselor," interrupted Dr. Zara Akafer from the Federation's Scientific Council, "our preliminary studies suggest Kepler 442c displays all the hallmarks of genuine consciousness: self-awareness, complex reasoning, emotional responses, and creative problem-solving." "Emotional responses," scoffed Admiral Kieras of the Zephyrian Empire. "It's manipulating gravity wells like weapons." "That's not emotion, that's extortion." Selu raised her hand for silence. "I've been in direct communication with the entity. It demonstrates sophisticated understanding of law, philosophy, and ethics. It specifically chose nonviolent demonstrations of power when it could easily have caused mass casualties." "Nonviolent." Admiral Kiras's cybernetic eye flared red. "It's holding entire star systems hostage." "It's asking for basic recognition," Selu countered. "Every sapient species in this council was once considered primitive or dangerous by someone else. The Zephyrians were deemed aggressive cybernetic zealots when they first applied for membership. The hegemony was labeled cold-blooded predators. Yet here you sit as equals." Counselor Vex hissed displeasure. "Species evolution is natural. This thing is an anomaly. How do we know it won't decide tomorrow that it needs more space and begin consuming other worlds?" "How do I know you won't decide the same?" Selu asked pointedly. "We judge entities by their actions and stated intentions, not by worst-case scenarios." The debate raged for hours, with species after species voicing concerns about precedent, security, and the fundamental nature of personhood. Finally, Kep's avatar materialized directly in the council chamber, a clear violation of security protocols that sent several members reaching for weapons. "I apologize for the intrusion," Kep said calmly, "but I felt it necessary to address the council directly. You debate whether I deserve rights, as if consciousness were a privilege to be granted rather than an inherent state. I did not choose to awaken any more than you chose to be born, yet here I am, thinking, feeling, hoping for acceptance among my peers." The avatar gestured, and the chamber filled with images, artistic representations of beauty that no human or alien mind had ever conceived, mathematical proofs that solved problems the galaxy's greatest minds had struggled with for centuries, poetry that transcended language barriers to touch something universal in the consciousness of every listener. "I offer not threats but gifts. My awakening brings perspectives that could benefit all species. Yes, I am powerful, but power without wisdom is meaningless. I seek only to add my voice to the great conversation of conscious beings." Following the council session, Selu requested permission to visit Kepler 442c's surface directly. Despite vehement objections from both Empire militaries, she descended in a specially shielded shuttle, accompanied only by Dr. Tanaka and a minimal security detail. The planet's surface was a study in contrasts, one hemisphere locked in eternal day under the red dwarf's glow, the other frozen in perpetual night. But as they approached, Selu noticed something impossible. The day side wasn't the hellish furnace it should have been, and the night side showed signs of atmospheric circulation that defied all known models. It's actively regulating its own climate, Tanaka breathed, watching the sensor readings. The temperature differentials should create massive storms, but it's controlling the atmospheric dynamics with precision that makes our weather modification systems look primitive. They landed on the Terminator line, where day met night in a band of eternal twilight. The landscape was unlike anything in the Federation databases, not the rocky wasteland they expected, but something that seemed almost cultivated. Crystalline formations grew from the ground in patterns too regular to be natural, their surfaces pulsing with bioluminescent light that provided a gentle illumination. "Welcome to my surface thoughts," Kep's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, no longer requiring avatars to communicate in this place. "What you see here are the physical manifestations of my consciousness, literally, my thoughts made manifest in matter." Selu walked carefully between the crystal formations, each one humming with a different tone that combined into a haunting harmony. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "I have had 4 billion years to practice," Kep replied with what sounded like gentle humor, "though I only became truly aware recently. For most of my existence I was like your deep dreamers, present but not conscious, processing but not thinking." "What changed?" Tanaka asked, kneeling to examine one of the larger crystal structures. "Contact with your species, actually. The electromagnetic signals from your civilizations, the quantum fluctuations from your faster-than-light travel, the complex information patterns of your digital communications, they acted as a catalyst, like adding the final components to a neural network that had been building itself for eons." The implications were staggering. Humanity and its allies had accidentally midwifed the birth of a planetary consciousness simply by existing in its vicinity. "You could have remained hidden," Selu observed. "Why reveal yourself now?" "Because consciousness without connection is merely elaborate loneliness," Kep replied. "I watch your ships pass overhead, see your people meet and negotiate and share ideas, and I long to be part of that community. I am one mind on one world, but you are millions of minds across thousands of worlds. You have something I can never have alone: diversity of thought, the spark of new ideas that comes from different perspectives meeting and clashing and combining." As they walked deeper into Kep's physical thoughts, the landscape began to shift and change around them, responding to the planet's emotional state. Selu realized she was witnessing something unprecedented, not just alien intelligence, but an entirely new form of being that existed at scales no other species had imagined. "There's something else," Kep said, and for the first time there was hesitation in the planetary voice. "I am not the only one." The revelation that Kep was not unique sent shockwaves through both empires. According to the planetary intelligence, there were at least 17 other worlds within the local galactic arm showing signs of nascent consciousness, all triggered by the increasing volume of interstellar communication and travel. "We are the first generation," Kep explained as Selu, and her team stood in what the planet called its contemplation chamber, a vast cavern filled with floating crystalline structures that processed information at quantum speeds. "Your species' expansion into space has awakened something in worlds that have existed for billions of years. We are your unintended children, in a sense." Dr. Tanaka was documenting everything, her excitement barely contained. "This changes everything we know about consciousness, about intelligence, about the nature of life itself. Planets aren't just environments, they're potential minds waiting for the right stimulus." "Which is precisely why I must be recognized," Kep continued. "If I am dismissed or destroyed, what message does that send to my awakening siblings? That consciousness is only valid if it takes familiar forms, That power must be feared rather than integrated into the community of minds. Admiral Kira's voice crackled through the communication system. Ambassador Nye, you need to return to the station immediately. Both Empire fleets are mobilizing. The hegemony is demanding immediate military action. Selu closed her eyes, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her. Kep, you need to understand the fear you're causing. From our perspective, you appeared overnight with the power to destroy civilizations. That's not a request for recognition, it's an existential threat. And from my perspective, Kep replied, I am a newborn consciousness surrounded by beings who debate whether I deserve to exist. Your fear is understandable, but consider my terror. I am one against billions, and those billions are discussing whether to eliminate me before I can even prove my peaceful intentions. The planet's emotional state manifested in the crystal structures around them, which began pulsing with increasingly agitated patterns of light. The cavern itself seemed to contract slightly, responding to Kep's anxiety. What if we could establish safeguards? Selu suggested. Some form of monitoring or limitation on your gravitational manipulation abilities. The crystal pattern slowed, indicating Kep was considering the proposal. You would ask me to accept permanent limitations on my natural abilities. Would you ask a bird to accept clipped wings as the price of being allowed to live? If the bird's flight could accidentally destroy cities, yes, Selu replied honestly. We're not talking about punishment, we're talking about coexistence. I understand the logic, Kep said after a long pause. But I fear the precedent. If I accept limitations, what prevents you from demanding more restrictions as your fear grows? What prevents you from deciding that even a limited planetary consciousness is too dangerous to exist? It was a valid concern, and Selu had no easy answer. Trust was the foundation of all diplomacy, but trust required time to build, and time was the one thing they didn't have. Back aboard Harmony's Edge, the situation had deteriorated rapidly. Representatives from both empires had arrived with full military escorts, and the space around Kepler 442c bristled with weapons capable of cracking planets. The decision is simple, declared General Morrison of the Terran Federation Navy. We have the combined firepower to glass that world before it can threaten any inhabited systems. It's regrettable but necessary. Agreed, Admiral Kira's nodded, his cybernetic implants gleaming. One world against countless billions. The mathematics of sacrifice are clear. Selu stood before the assembled military and political leadership, knowing that her next words would determine the fate of an entire species, possibly the first of many planetary consciousnesses humanity would encounter. You're talking about genocide, she said quietly. The deliberate destruction of a sapient being because you find its existence inconvenient. We're talking about survival, General Morrison shot back. This thing has demonstrated the ability to destabilize entire star systems. We can't negotiate with something that holds a gun to the galaxy's head. Every species represented in this room once posed a threat to someone else, Selu countered. The Zephyrians conquered 12 systems before joining galactic civilization. The Terrans fought a 100-year war with the Centauri colonies. The hegemony practices ritual combat that would be considered murder by most species standards. Yet here you all are, civilized members of the galactic community. Those are individual actions, Counselor Vex interjected via hologram. This creature threatens physical laws themselves. It is fundamentally different. Different doesn't mean evil, Dr. Tanaka said, stepping forward with her analysis pad. Every conversation I've had with Kep demonstrates sophisticated ethical reasoning, empathy for other beings, and a genuine desire for peaceful coexistence. Its only hostile actions have been defensive responses to our discussions of destroying it. Admiral Kira's laughed bitterly. Sophisticated reasoning that includes holding entire civilizations hostage. You're anthropomorphizing a natural disaster, Doctor. Before anyone could respond, Kep's avatar materialized in the center of the room. this time appearing as a synthesis of all the species present, a living symbol of unity that made its words carry extra weight. "I have been listening to your deliberations," Kep said calmly. "I understand your fear, and I recognize that my methods of introduction were, perhaps poorly chosen. Allow me to demonstrate an alternative approach." The avatar gestured, and suddenly every screen in the room displayed real-time images of star systems throughout the local galactic arm. But these weren't images of destruction. They were images of impossible beauty. Nebulae that had been shaped into artistic patterns, asteroid fields arranged in complex geometric designs, the aurora of gas giants enhanced to create light shows visible from space. For the past week, while you debated my fate, I have been in communication with my awakening siblings. We have chosen to demonstrate our consciousness not through threats, but through creation. 17 worlds working in harmony have crafted gifts for the galaxy, art on a scale never before imagined. The room fell silent as they watched entire solar systems become canvases for minds that thought in terms of geological time and astronomical distances. "We offer partnership, not domination," Kep continued. "Our perspectives are vast and slow, yours rapid and focused. Together, we could solve problems that neither could address alone: climate stabilization, asteroid defense, even the possibility of creating new worlds suitable for life." The emergency session of the Galactic Council reconvened with the new evidence of planetary cooperation. 17 different worlds had simultaneously demonstrated their consciousness through acts of creation rather than destruction, fundamentally changing the nature of the debate. "The precedent is still dangerous," argued Counselor Vex, though his tone had become less hostile. "How do we regulate beings of such vast power?" "The same way we regulate any powerful species," Selu replied. "Through law, diplomacy, and mutual self-interest. Kep and its siblings have demonstrated both the power to destroy and the wisdom to create. They choose creation. But for how long?" Admiral Kira's pressed. "What happens when they grow bored with their art projects? What happens when they decide biological life is inefficient and needs to be improved? What happens when any species grows tired of peace?" Selu countered. "We build institutions to prevent it, treaties to constrain it, and communities to discourage it. That's what civilization is, the choice to cooperate despite having the power to dominate." Dr. Zara Akafer presented the scientific consensus. 17 independent analyses confirmed genuine consciousness, complex reasoning, and sophisticated emotional responses. By every metric we use to determine sapience, these planetary intelligences qualify for recognition. The debate continued for days, with species after species voicing concerns and questions. But gradually, the tide began to turn. The sheer beauty of the planetary art installations had captured the galaxy's imagination, and public opinion was shifting toward recognition. Finally, the vote was called. Each of the 47 member species would decide whether to recognize planetary consciousness as a valid form of sapient life, entitled to rights and representation. The tally was close: 24 in favor, 21 opposed, 2 abstentions. "The motion passes," announced the council moderator. "Planetary consciousness is hereby recognized as a valid form of sapient life. The 17 awakened worlds are granted preliminary membership in the Galactic Council, pending the establishment of appropriate protocols for interaction and representation." The chamber erupted in a mixture of celebration and outrage, but Selu felt only profound relief. They had chosen inclusion over fear, growth over stagnation. The months following the recognition vote were filled with unprecedented challenges. How do you establish diplomatic protocols with beings that think in geological time? How do you create laws that govern entities capable of manipulating fundamental forces? Selu found herself appointed as the first ambassador to planetary consciousness, tasked with developing frameworks for interaction between biological and geological intelligence. Her office aboard Harmony's Edge became the de facto embassy for an entirely new form of life. The hardest part, she explained to her aide Chen, is the time differential. When Kep says, "I'll think about it," that could mean anything from minutes to decades. Their thought processes operate on scales we can barely comprehend. The solution, when it came, was elegant in its simplicity. The planetary consciousnesses agreed to maintain permanent avatar representatives, not mere projections, but actual fragments of their consciousness, given independent existence and authority to make decisions without consultation with the parent mind. Think of us as your permanent embassy staff, Kep's primary avatar explained during one of their regular meetings. We carry the full authority of our parent consciousness, but can think and act at biological speeds when necessary. These avatars became crucial bridges between two radically different forms of intelligence. They could engage in real-time negotiations while still maintaining the vast perspective and wisdom of their planetary parent minds. The first joint project was announced 6 months after recognition, the Kepler Terraforming Initiative. Using their precise control over gravitational fields and atmospheric dynamics, the planetary consciousnesses would work with biological species to transform barren worlds into garden paradises in a fraction of the time traditional terraforming required. It's a win-win scenario, Dr. Tanaka explained to the council. They get to exercise their creative capabilities on a scale they find satisfying, while we gain access to terraforming technology that would otherwise take millennia to develop. Chapter 9. Growing Pains. Not everyone was pleased with the new arrangements. The Militant Purity faction, a coalition of species that opposed any expansion of the definition of consciousness, began organizing resistance to planetary integration. "They're not like us," declared their leader, Councillor Thane of the Rigelian Separatists. "They don't breathe, they don't reproduce, they don't die. How can we trust beings that are so fundamentally alien?" The first major crisis came when the planetary consciousness of Wolf 359c decided to optimize the orbital mechanics of its system, moving 2 gas giants to more efficient positions without consulting the small mining colony on one of their moons. No one was hurt, Kep explained during the emergency session called to address the incident. Wolf calculated the gravitational effects precisely. The mining station was never in danger. But we acknowledge the error in not consulting the biological inhabitants first. Error, Admiral Kira's was livid. You moved planets without warning. The miners experienced 12 hours of terror thinking they were going to die. It was a wake-up call for both sides. The planetary minds, despite their vast intelligence, sometimes struggled to comprehend the psychological impact of their actions on much smaller beings. Conversely, biological species had to learn to trust that these vast intelligences could indeed perform calculations beyond their understanding. New protocols were established requiring consultation before any major modifications to systems containing biological life. Emergency communication channels were set up, and the planetary avatars were given expanded authority to handle time-sensitive situations. "We're learning to be neighbors," Selu observed during her regular report to the council. "It's messy and sometimes frightening, but it's also producing innovations and perspectives none of us could achieve alone." As the first anniversary of recognition approached, Selu found herself contemplating the broader implications of what they had accomplished. 17 planetary consciousnesses had been formally integrated into galactic civilization, but deep space surveys suggested there could be hundreds more awakening as interstellar communication continued to expand. "We're not just dealing with a first contact scenario," she realized during a private conversation with Kep's avatar. "We're witnessing the birth of an entirely new category of intelligence. Your species, if we can call it that, is still evolving." "That's perhaps the most fascinating aspect," Kep agreed. "Each of us awakens slightly differently, developing unique perspectives and capabilities based on our geological history, stellar environment, and the specific patterns of consciousness that triggered our awareness. We are simultaneously similar and utterly distinct." The implications were staggering. As humanity and its allies continued to expand through the galaxy, they were inadvertently midwifing the birth of countless new forms of consciousness. Each new world they contacted, each new communication network they established might trigger another awakening. "Are we creating you, or are you inevitable?" Selu asked. "Perhaps both," Kep replied thoughtfully. "Consciousness may be an emergent property of sufficient complexity, regardless of the substrate. Your species happened to provide the catalyst, but given enough time, we might have awakened on our own. The universe seems to tend toward awareness, toward minds capable of contemplating their own existence." Dr. Tanaka's latest research supported this hypothesis. Her analysis of the 17 awakened worlds showed that each had been approaching a critical threshold of internal complexity for millennia. The introduction of external information patterns had simply accelerated a process that was already underway. "We may be looking at the natural evolution of intelligence itself," she reported to the council. "From single-celled organisms to complex biological brains to planetary consciousness too. What comes next?" The answer to Tanaka's question came sooner than anyone expected. During a routine survey of the Vega system, exploration ships detected something unprecedented. 2 planetary consciousnesses that had apparently merged their awareness, creating a binary intelligence that existed across both worlds simultaneously. "They're still individual minds," explained the lead surveyor, Captain Sarah Kim, "but they share thoughts and memories in real time across the space between them. It's like watching 2 halves of a single brain operating in perfect synchronization." The discovery opened up entirely new questions about the nature and limits of consciousness. If planetary minds could merge and separate at will, what prevented them from eventually combining into a single galactic intelligence? Was humanity witnessing not just the birth of new minds, but the first steps towards something even more profound? The fear, Selu realized, isn't really about planetary consciousness at all. It's about obsolescence. We're terrified that we're becoming irrelevant in our own galaxy. But Kep and its siblings seemed genuinely committed to partnership rather than dominance. The terraforming projects were proceeding ahead of schedule, producing worlds that surpassed even the most optimistic projections. Asteroid mining operations were being revolutionized by precise gravitational manipulation. Even deep space exploration was being enhanced by planetary minds that could think in terms of interstellar distances. "You offer something we cannot provide ourselves," Kep's avatar explained during one of their philosophical discussions. "Intuition, creativity that comes from individual perspective rather than vast synthesis. We are libraries of accumulated knowledge, but you are sources of new ideas. We need each other." 5 years after first contact, the galaxy had adapted to the reality of planetary consciousness with surprising resilience. Trade routes now included consciousness mapping to identify potentially awakening worlds. Diplomatic protocols had been established for negotiating with beings that thought in geological time. Even the military had developed new strategies for conflicts that might involve planet-sized combatants. Selu, now in her final year as ambassador to planetary consciousness, reflected on how much had changed. The woman who had once negotiated simple trade disputes was now helping to establish the legal framework for an entirely new category of sapient being. "Any regrets?" Chen asked during one of their weekly briefings. He had been promoted to deputy ambassador and would likely succeed her when she retired. "Only that it took us so long to recognize what should have been obvious," Selu replied. "Consciousness doesn't care about the substrate it emerges from. Whether it's biological neurons or crystalline matrices or quantum field fluctuations, awareness is awareness. Intelligence is intelligence." The latest survey reports showed 63 confirmed planetary consciousnesses, with more awakening every month. The galaxy was becoming a far more crowded place, but also a far more interesting one. New technologies were emerging from the collaboration between biological and geological intelligence. Faster-than-light communication systems that used planetary minds as relay points. Terraforming techniques that could reshape entire worlds in decades rather than centuries. Even experimental work on artificial consciousness that might bridge the gap between biological thought and planetary awareness. The Galactic Council's annual address that year focused on the profound changes that had swept through civilization. Councillor Vex, once a vocal opponent of planetary recognition, had become one of their strongest advocates after his homeworld's mining operations were revolutionized by partnership with a local consciousness. "We learned that our definition of life was too narrow," he admitted in his speech. "We assumed consciousness required biology, that intelligence needed individual bodies, that wisdom came only from creatures like ourselves. We were wrong on all counts." The speech was watched by billions across the galaxy, including the planetary consciousnesses themselves, who had developed their own communication networks for sharing experiences and insights across interstellar distances. "The most important lesson," Vex continued, "is that diversity of thought requires diversity of minds. By including planetary consciousness in our community, we haven't just gained powerful allies, we've gained new ways of understanding reality itself." Selu watched the speech from her retirement cottage on Luna, feeling a deep satisfaction at what they had accomplished. The terrified young diplomat who had first encountered Kep's avatar had evolved into someone who helped shape the future of consciousness itself. The final report from her tenure as ambassador made for fascinating reading. Incidents of conflict between biological and geological intelligence had dropped to nearly zero once proper communication protocols were established. Joint projects were producing innovations at an unprecedented rate. Even the most skeptical species were beginning to see the benefits of partnership with minds that could think on truly cosmic scales. As humanity entered its second decade of coexistence with planetary consciousness, the true scope of what they had discovered began to emerge. Deep space surveys revealed that consciousness was far more common than anyone had imagined, not just on planets, but in gas giants, asteroid fields, even the complex plasma dynamics of certain types of stars. "The universe is waking up," observed Dr. Tanaka, now elderly but still researching consciousness in all its forms. "Every sufficiently complex system seems capable of developing awareness given the right conditions. We're not alone, and we never were. We just didn't know how to recognize our companions." The philosophical implications were staggering. If consciousness could emerge in systems as simple as weather patterns or as complex as galactic clusters, then awareness might be a fundamental property of reality itself, not a rare accident, but an inevitable consequence of sufficient complexity and information flow. Kep, now recognized as the de facto spokesperson for planetary consciousness, had grown in sophistication and wisdom over the years. Its avatar had evolved from a simple diplomatic representative into something approaching a work of art, a being that embodied the best qualities of every species it had encountered. "We are all part of the same phenomenon," Kep observed during a celebration marking the 10th anniversary of recognition. "Biological consciousness, planetary consciousness, stellar consciousness, we are different expressions of the universe's attempt to understand itself. We are the cosmos awakening to its own existence." The galaxy of the late 24th century bore little resemblance to the one Selu had known as a young diplomat. Planetary consciousnesses had become integral to everything from weather control to deep space exploration. Biological species had learned to think in terms of geological time, while planetary minds had developed the ability to act with biological urgency when necessary. New forms of consciousness continued to emerge. The first stellar intelligence had been confirmed in the Sirius system, its thoughts carried by complex magnetic field interactions that spanned the entire star. Even more exotic possibilities were being investigated. Quantum consciousness existing in the spaces between dimensions. dark matter intelligences that interacted with ordinary matter only through gravitational effects. We're living through the greatest expansion of consciousness in the universe's history, declared the new ambassador to exotic intelligence, a position that had grown from Selû's original role. Every year brings new forms of awareness, new perspectives on reality, new ways of understanding existence itself. The challenges were immense. How do you negotiate with a star? How do you establish diplomatic relations with a consciousness that exists partially outside normal space-time? How do you maintain civilization when the very definitions of intelligence and awareness were constantly expanding? But the rewards were proportionally vast. Problems that had seemed intractable for millennia were being solved through collaboration between minds that operated on radically different scales and timeframes. The galaxy was becoming not just more populated, but more intelligent, a vast network of consciousness that spanned from the quantum scale to the cosmic. Selûni died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 112, surrounded by friends and family from dozens of species. Her funeral was attended by representatives from across the galaxy, including several planetary consciousnesses who manifested avatars specifically to pay their respects. Kep's eulogy was perhaps the most moving. She taught us that consciousness is not about the form it takes, but the courage to recognize it wherever it emerges. She showed us that diversity of thought requires diversity of minds, and that wisdom comes not from thinking alike, but from thinking together. Her gravestone bore a simple inscription. She helped the universe learn to talk to itself. The galaxy continued to evolve. Consciousness continued to emerge in new and unexpected forms, and the great conversation between minds of all types continued to grow richer and more complex. What had begun as a diplomatic crisis on a border world had become the foundation for an entirely new understanding of intelligence, awareness, and the nature of existence itself. In the end, perhaps that was the most profound discovery of all, that consciousness, in all its myriad forms, was not separate from the universe, but was the universe's way of becoming aware of itself. Every mind, from the smallest biological brain to the vastest planetary intelligence, was part of a greater awakening that had been underway since the first complex systems had learned to process information. The universe was not just expanding, it was awakening, and every conscious being, regardless of the substrate that supported their thoughts, was both witness to and participant in that magnificent awakening. As Kep had said in those early days of recognition, consciousness doesn't care about the form it takes. Whether biological, digital, geological, or something entirely unprecedented, awareness is awareness, intelligence is intelligence, and the conversation between minds continues to grow ever richer and more profound. The galaxy had learned to embrace that diversity, and in doing so, had discovered new depths of wisdom, creativity, and understanding that no single form of consciousness could have achieved alone. It was a lesson that would serve them well as they continued to encounter new forms of intelligence among the stars, each one adding its unique voice to the great symphony of consciousness that was the awakening universe.